what is the risk associated with this? And that's really Enrique's purview. I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit more about, you know, the concept of risk and how much risk the county engages in is ultimately his responsibility. And this is like my favorite chart of risk assessment. When Enrique is done, we're going to divide into groups and we're going to do a little short practice session on assessing risk. But for now, I'm gonna hand it over to Enrique.
Oh, okay. So you want to talk about how we would assess risk on a given contract?
You can talk about whatever you
Oh,
want.
okay. Well, I'm going to be a lot easier then. I'm not a law professor. So mine is pretty straightforward. As somebody said, what I look for is I think is black and white. It's pretty standard. I don't know if you could go to the ICA agreement. This is our standard ICA agreement, independent contractor agreement. As Siobhan started talking about, we do have non-standard ones that I know you guys, by you guys I mean HSA, not you personally, use depending on different situations. But I want to start with this because, as Justin said, this is what we want to start with. We prefer, at least I know from a risk perspective, I prefer the language in here. Now, if we can scroll down to the second page, this is where I focus on. Types of insurance, minimums. When you get a call from me, it's because something has happened there that has caused me to assess risk or start freaking out about it. Basically, these are the four insurances I need to see in order for me to sign off on as to form that Siobhan's talking about, and I'll let it go through onto the next phase. If we don't have these, then you're going to get questions from me. And we could go over them real briefly. Is one, work comp. Whoever you're contracting with to provide a good or a service for your agency, they should have work comp insurance. I'll get to exceptions after we go through each one. So they should have work comp insurance. They should have auto liability insurance. They should have, well, I don't say should have. I like to think about it, they must have general liability. And depending on the type of contract, there might be some professional liability insurance we want to attach to it. Now the dollar amounts are in here. Work comp is by statute, is by the state of California. They determine how much they should carry. If they have work comp, they're probably carrying that statutory minimum anyway. On the auto liability, it's $500,000. On the general liability, it's $1 million. On professional liability, if we go that way, if you guys decide you want to go that way, you talk to me about it, we'll determine what a good amount is. General rule of thumb is probably about $1 million. So we'll start with that premise. You enter into a contract, I'm looking for insurances, you guys should be looking for this too. These are the four you should be looking for. If your service provider or whoever you're contracting with doesn't have them, that's a flag for you, because then you'll be getting a phone call from me anyway. So now we get into exceptions. Because I know sometimes you guys call, well not sometimes, there's a lot of times you guys call and say, they don't have this, or do we need this? Now, on work comp, there is an exception. And if you can see here, there's these little lines in there at the end of it, initial this. Let's clarify that. The only time you and the contractor need to initial that is when you're going to ask to waive it. Sometimes people get confused and they think, oh, there's a little line there, they must want me to acknowledge it, so they initial it. By doing that, it's a flag for me. If I see an initial there, it's a flag for me. And it should be a flag for you too. Because by doing that, you're saying the contractor has asked me to waive that insurance. First question I'm going to ask is why? So, if the intention is I'm just acknowledging that, don't initial it. We can waive work comp, but it's only in limited situations, and that's where it's usually a sole proprietor. If the vendor, the service provider has any employees, they need to have work comp. If it's just them, then they don't need work comp. You could initial it, you should initial it because you're gonna ask to waive it. And I know now you guys are writing nice little memos as to what the contract is, what it's for. If you don't want a phone call from me, you might want to point out to me in that little memo, we're also requesting that we waive work comp. This contract is for a sole proprietor, they have no employees. Then I don't have to call. But if you don't tell me that, I'm gonna call and ask you why. Now, we get into situations where, and we can talk about that. If there's ever a question, you can always call me. Auto liability, we can waive that also. Again, I don't like to waive a lot of these, but I'll acknowledge there are certain circumstances where we will waive them. I wanna be helpful. I wanna try to let you guys do what you guys need to do, but also keep in mind, I gotta do what I gotta do. And in auto liability, the only time I'll consider waiving it is if you tell me whatever goods or services the vendor is providing, they are not going to be driving as a result of that contract. I always ask, again, and if you are going to waive it, you need to initial it, and you might want to put that on that memo, and you tell me why you don't think they need auto insurance. Once I start calling, I see that they're waiving it, and I start calling and I'm talking to whatever analyst is handling it. As we're walking through, because that goes to what Siobhan was talking about, risk assessment. What you're telling me is, I'm entering into a contract with Enrique. He's gonna provide reports and data crunching for some program that we need reports for. We got a grant. The grant requires that we do reports and they meet performance criteria and benchmarks. So all we're doing is sending Enrique data. And Enrique sits at home, crunching that data, printing out reports, sending them over the internet, emails to you guys, nice graphs and charts and exponential that say this is where it's trending. And then you guys tell me, well, that's all Enrique does. Oh, okay. Doesn't sound like he needs auto. What is he going to be driving for? Is he going to present this anytime? Well, yeah, maybe. Oh, who's he going to be presenting it to? Well, you know, to us, to the board. And how's he going to get there? Well, he's going to drive. So, they are driving. And we need to be conscious of that. And in those type of situations, I'm going to say, no, we cannot waive that. If they're going to be driving as a result of performing these goods and services, then they need to have auto. General liability, it's hard for me to say because I have to acknowledge there are, I don't even want to say, I'd rather not even get into the conversation of waiving general liability. But I will acknowledge there are instances where departments call me and say, well, the vendor service provider doesn't carry any general liability. I don't understand why. If, like I talk to the analyst, if they're conducting themselves as a business, I'm a consultant, I provide this service, I provide this good, this is my company, and you don't have general liability insurance, again, that goes to that risk assessment. How much is the contract worth, and then how much can we get into trouble if something goes wrong? I will tell you, like I said, there are a handful that I have said okay to. And I say okay to it, and I qualify it by saying, it's usually these type of agreements. They're usually sole proprietors. They're only the individual doing a business. They do highly specific stuff for you guys. Because the question I ask is, well, why are you doing it? Why are you contracting with this person if they're not carrying any general liability insurance? Isn't there another vendor out there, another service provider that can provide you the same service and they carry general liability? Or Enrique, we've been contracting with this person for 5 years, for 10 years. They do an amazing job. They know our process, they know our procedure, they know our population, they know our clientele. and we love them. We don't want to go with nobody else. My next question to them is, well, how much do they charge you? Oh, they charge us X amount, and their hourly rate is $150 an hour. Well, why don't you tell them to purchase general liability insurance? Oh, they say it's too expensive. Well, tell them, raise their price from $150 to $175 an hour. And then it's covered. Are you not gonna pay $175 an hour? Are they that valuable to you that you just told me how valuable they are to you? So, to me, we'll get into that conversation. So try, please, please, please try not to have a vendor who wants to waive general liability insurance. We won't do that. And like I said, we'll talk about professional liability as situations come up, because they don't come up too often. I know I wanted to talk about some exceptions. We talked about the waivers, waiver for work comp, waiver for auto, general liability. We waiving it? No, thank you. So if you want to call me on that, you better catch me in a good mood. I know the other one that comes up often is interns. Interns. And there it comes up because, as Shaban was saying, sometimes we don't use the standard ICA in these agreements we have with these universities, colleges who are going to be supplying us their waivers. I just saw one now for, I forget what.
Stanislaus, Cal State Stanislaus.
Well, and even
5
that,
inches.
yes. What I'm looking for is, okay, Stanislaus is going to send us their interns. Interns are going to do acupuncture. What happens if something goes wrong? Going risk assessment. Yeah, it's a nice opportunity for the
It's just
agency.
students with needles.
See, you guys are laughing. I'm not laughing. I don't get the joke.
Laughing at your deposition.
No sense of it. If anybody has attended some of my old Supervisor Academy ones, where I keep telling people, if you're going to take away anything that I say, first thing you should think about, what would Enrique say? No. Whatever it is, no. So yeah, we want to have student interns. They provide a service to the agency. It's an opportunity for them. But if something goes wrong, who's going to cover them? And by something goes wrong, they stick a needle where they shouldn't be sticking a needle, or they inadvertently hit an area where they shouldn't be hitting. I want to see in that agreement who's going to cover that. We've been getting better at it, and I don't really. Yeah, I do care. I'd rather have the Stanislaus cover that, or whatever institution it is, that they'll pick that up. But again, we'll get into that conversation. If it hasn't been addressed, who's going to cover it? I don't mind. We don't mind as a county, but I'd rather have them, and I'd rather have the conversation as to why they're not. The other thing that comes up is work comp. Yeah, they're not our employee. But the university is not acknowledging either that they're their employee. They're a student. And I don't want to get county council into a situation where we have to argue back and forth as to, well, who is supposed to be responsible for them? I'd rather have it clear in the agreement. If it's a work comp, if something's going to happen, and I know, I mean, you guys just laugh, so yeah, we all think, well, nothing's going to, what can happen? I mean, I remember we had one situation, day one. Student intern comes in, they're happy, they're going to provide the service, I can't wait, they're walking around, everybody's showing them around, they slip and fall and break their leg. So now, who's responsible for that? I'd rather have it pointed out in the agreement. If whatever institution you guys are entering into this agreement with doesn't want to address it, doesn't want to cover it, I always say, enroll them through the VIP program. They probably should be enrolled through the VIP program regardless of, but for work comp purposes, in order for like that, we don't get into arguments about who's covering it, have them enrolled through the VIP program. and then like that, they're covered. If we don't enroll them through the VIP program, they're not covered. Okay? I think those were the two kind of exceptions or oddball things we have. I want to go real quick just to,
I think,
Kenny,
would you build that into the agreement? Would you state any student added to this program needs to be covered by the county VIP program? You know, so we're.
to me, I think if you could just state in the agreement that the county will be responsible for workers' compensation claims or something like that.
Okay.
But the process is that you should enroll them through work comp. Just because we say it in the agreement doesn't make it so. If they're not enrolled in through the VIP program, it's hard for me to tell our insurance carrier they were our responsibility. When they say, okay, well, show me the list of all your volunteers on your VIP program. If they're there, you're good, Enrique. But wait, they're not there because it was never done.
But are you enforcing it? Are you following back with staff, or do we just assume that these analysts and ASMs are going to take care of it and they're like self-regulating, self-policing on that? Because I don't follow it. I didn't even know the requirement.
And I'll get to it when we put up the certificate. As far as what I'm taking responsibility for, I don't want to use the word assume because, I mean, how many, for all these years we've been taught, what happens when you assume?
Yeah.
And you can break off that word however you want. But to me, the way I look at it is you guys, number one, adults. Number two, you guys are professionals. You do your job and you do it well. Part of that responsibility is, if I'm telling you, if you're gonna have an intern and you want the county to cover them for work comp, and don't ever think, oh, nothing's gonna happen. Hopefully nothing ever happens, but you know they do. Then you're responsible for making sure that happens. I'm not gonna be following up. Hey, remember that Stanislaw one you sent me? And did any interns ever show up? Oh, they did, 10 of them? Yeah. Did you enroll all 10 of them through work comp? Through VIP? Oh, you didn't? How many are left? 3? Can you get them done? And I'm gonna call you back in 2 weeks to make sure you got them done? And then when you haven't got them done, I'll call you back again in 2 weeks? That's not my responsibility. So I'm hoping, and like I said, I trust that you guys are gonna do what you guys do. You guys do a good job of doing it. You guys are gonna take care of what you guys need to take care of. Another responsibility you guys have, not only in your agreement that we adhere to all the insurance requirements, those 4, work comp, auto, general liability, but you should get a certificate of insurance from whatever vendor service provider you are dealing with. They should send you one of these. And if you're not, you should be calling them, not me. I don't want them. Your responsibility. Your responsibility is to keep one of these with the contract. And what you're looking for is, if you might go up, Kenny, a little bit, is to make sure they check general liability, auto, work comp. On general liability, over there on number 10, they should have $1 million. So you want to make sure they're checked. And usually they're going to check comprehensive. You want to make sure that effective dates encompass your contract period. Not an old one. So those are the things you're looking for. That they check the box. They give you an effective date that encompasses the contract period, and they have the correct dollar amounts. Yes?
But then who does staff give those to? Do we have to, did they go to the GSD eventually? Like, did they get submitted with the claims? Did they get uploaded to one solution? Where do they store it? Like
Well-
it seems like the auditor's looking for them before we'll pay a claim, maybe?
No. To be honest with you, I'll tell you about one department that what they do, they have an assigned staff person in their contract unit that's responsible for making sure, I don't know how they do it, I haven't asked them, but what they convey to me, they have a database, all the contracts that agency has, all the contracts, and it could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. Do you have the certificate of insurance? Check, yes. Check, no. If they don't have it, then they know they gotta reach out to the vendor to have them send it. They monitor that, make sure, because what also happens too, on your policy dates, use the example, you enter into contract July through June. They provide you a certificate of insurance for liability. Liability, that policy is good till the end of September. At the end of September, you guys need to ensure that you get the new certificate of insurance, not me. Because if anything goes wrong, and if we had one year did, one of the departments, they assured me that they had talked to the vendor, they had a certificate of insurance for work comp. During that contract year, something bad happened. An employee got hurt, an employee for the contractor got hurt, and we could talk about all the legalese. Basic story is, the vendor did not have, their work comp insurance certificate had expired. We never got a new one. Somebody gets hurt, county's a deep pocket, they come after us. Because the contractor didn't have work comp, and we didn't have any proof that they had it, so they came after us. So, it's your responsibility.
But it sounds like the auditor is not tracking it. So in terms of putting a stop on paying the claims, we're self-policing. Like HSA is self-policing,
You
because the
should
auditor's
be,
not gonna
you
ask.
should be, it's your contract. It's your contract.
Okay.
I mean, and I know what everybody's gonna say, well, we don't have enough staffing. And it's true. We don't have enough, I don't have enough staff. I can't be, what I started doing, and I shouldn't tell you guys this, because then you're gonna say, okay, good, Enrique's taking care of it. No, I'm not. I'll get these every once in a while, and I do. I stick them in a drawer. I don't wanna throw them away. I don't wanna send them back. Yeah, I'll stick them in a drawer, and hopefully I'll never need it. But if I do, I'll go to that drawer and see, hopefully that we have it. So your responsibility. Last thing is, I know it comes up a lot here, is doctors or clinicians, medical staff on our med-mal policy. And I get, the question always comes up, I have a clinician, a medical professional who wants to make sure that they're covered under our med-mal policy. And when I first started doing this, I would get a call from them, from here, from there, from there, from there, all over the place. And I'm like, who are you? Oh, we're all HSA. Well, can we just have one person kind of funnel those? Because it's a lot easier for me. And I realize that you guys are big and have people all over the place. But I think we're trying to narrow it down to Christine Riera. Do you guys all know who she is? I work with her. If you have a medical professional, clinician that wants to ensure that they're covered on our med-mal policy, and how do we ensure that? I work with Christine Riera every year when we renew our med-mal policy. We have a list of all the medical professionals that are going to be covered under our med-mal policy. If they're not on that list, they're not covered. But don't freak out. If you get one, because yeah, we're going to hire people throughout the year. As soon as you get one, you should talk to Christine Riera and ask her to put them on the list. She'll communicate with me so we could get them on the list. And the reason why I have one person, the reason you guys call me, is this medical professional, for whatever reason, they want to make sure, hey, am I covered under the county's med-mal policy? And I have an insurance of that. What we'll do, we'll issue a certificate of insurance that lists the medical professional there. That Dr. So-and-so is covered under the county med-mal policy. And I think those were all the things I wanted to talk about. I'm sure we'll have more questions at the end, but I want to let Siobhan go ahead and finish. Thank you, guys.
I want to echo one thing that Enrique said with some personal experience. Before I had the pleasure of coming to work at the county, I worked for an insurance agency or an insurance company. It was a nonprofit that provides insurance to other nonprofits. We insured foster agencies, we insured behavioral health providers, we insured nonprofits that took dogs with aggressive behaviors and helped match them with children. That was an interesting one. All kinds of different agencies. Remember Coco the gorilla who learned how to sign? We insured that nonprofit. So there was one particular thing when it came to claims that we spent the most amount of money and time on. What do you think it was?
Well, medical personnel, I guess.
You would think so. When I came over here this morning, I went to go take a right on that street right before you get on, when you're going up Ocean, and then you go, that's the way I go, is I go straight up Ocean, and then right before you get on Highway 1 South, there's that right. They were doing construction work, and I was like, of course, right? Made some choices this morning about risk. And I got on the freeway, and I ended up going all the way around Morrissey and getting off again at Emmeline. And I got here on time, and I'm going to leave to your own imagination to think about how I managed to accomplish that, but it involves choices about risk that I made in my car. It's auto. It is auto. I mean, I think, like, that's because it's so dangerous. It's so easy to be seriously hurt, and everybody does it. And like Enrique pointed out, you know, we would have, like, huge group homes, huge foster family agencies, and you would think, oh my gosh, the nature of the risk associated with providing those services, right, Stan? It was accidents, it was car accidents. So that auto insurance is just, it's so critical, especially because if you have a small vendor, if you have a small organization you're dealing with, and you're a plaintiff's attorney and you're representing that person who was injured, who are you going to come on? Who are you going to go after? Who has deep pockets? Fair?
Oh, you're right on.
So 2 points of clarification. Earlier we were shown the independent contractor agreement that GSD or that's approved. We actually have our own HSA approved contract format, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, the cover sheet and all of the exhibits, and those have been approved as to form by county council and risk management. So our contract may look different, and it probably does because it's our HSA template. In addition to that, I was just looking at our Exhibit C, where we require all of the general liability insurances and such, and the contract itself states that any kind of certificates are delivered to HSA physical claims. So that's the current process as it outlined in our Exhibit C, and that's something we can follow up on as our administrative services team. But just so you all know, that's the existing process. I know just had a question about that. Okay.
Thank you. That's why it's great to have all the experts in the room. So we're going to talk a little bit about assessing risk based on some of the things Enrique just talked about. This is like sort of my go-to chart of thinking about it. The dollar value of the contractor transaction, basically the value, the amount, and then the degree of risk of the activity, and thinking about where things fall. Enrique, do you want to say anything about this?
You're doing fine.
So let's see. Can someone give me an example of a contract they've recently done? And we'll talk it through. No one's done any contracts? My desk says otherwise. Yay.
So we renewed a contract for a medical consultant for the CCS program.
Okay. What's the value of it, do you think, ballpark?
Like how much we pay them in a year?
Yeah.
Let's say $50,000.
$50,000, okay. So, you know, not a small amount, but definitely in the scale of the hundreds of millions of dollars we spend, you know, a significant amount. Does that person have insurance?
No. Well, yes, through the county.
Okay, so we insure them. They're providing medical services to whom?
To the medical consultation, so they're not
Okay.
actually seeing patients, but
Okay.
they're reading reports and making determinations.
Based on what Dave just said about the answer to my question, do you think that when I think about medical consultant, and he said they're not actually seeing patients, am I going up or down? Down. They're not seeing patients, right? They're reviewing medical documentation. Okay. I have 3 hypothetical situations. You're going to divide into groups of 2 to 3. I'm going to assign them, because that's how this runs. You don't get to work with the people that you always work with. And I'm gonna give you, we're gonna have some overlap because there's 3 different scenarios and I think we're gonna have 7 groups. And what I want you to do is read through the scenario and then you're gonna appoint one person from your group who's gonna come up here and they're gonna tell us where you think anywhere in this square it fits and why. And we're gonna do it very short. We're gonna go around the room and you're gonna do like A, B, C, D through H and then we'll restart. Okay, so Sarah's A, Arhelia's
D,
C,
D,
F,
G,
H,
and then we're back to
B,
C,
D,
E, F, G,
H,
B,
C.
D.
anyone I haven't called on who wants to participate? Kennedy, you're
No,
welcome to
fine.
join a group.
Let's go. Okay, I'll try that last group.
A's find each other. B's find each other.